Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Modal chords built from notes outside the 7-note collection from our Earth analogy, those being the 5 ocean notes. Part number 2. So get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', for which you need Microsoft Excel. Here we are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there or just follow along, possibly building the part of the table that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab we may refer to, the example tab, in essence, the answer key, the practice tab, having pre-formatted cells, so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay. We're continuing to work in the blank tab where we started from scratch with a blank worksheet, continuing in essence in the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only our music skills, but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. Let's go on over to the example tab to get a reminder of what we are doing. We're looking at our chord constructions and the different ways that we can write those chords, trying to figure out what the best way for writing chords would be from the functional standpoint of actually playing music, writing down that music for future reference and for communication purposes, as well as possibly being able to design a MIDI system or a DAW system in the most efficient type of way. So what we've done before is we've said, these are the notes in our musical alphabet. We've put those together, and now we're going to give a list of the notes from the perspective of modal points, looking at the key of C as our collection of notes. So now our 12 notes are numbered not 1 through 12, but rather based on the relative positions for the collections of notes that we are in. We're then going to say that we have 7 of the modal points, but we're also going to add the ones in the middle, the ones that are in the ocean, give them a name, which Ionian, the one after Ionian, is going to be Ionian plus, or I would call it the Ionian Ocean. I just like the ring of that. You got the Dorian, and then you got the Dorian Ocean. You got the Phrygian, then you got the Lydian. There's no ocean between them. Then you've got the Lydian Ocean. You got the Mixolydian Ocean, the Aeolian Ocean, and then the Locrian. So then if we pull in our 7-note collection around the key of C, we have the no sharps and flats. These are the Nashville numbers 1 through 7, which are the numbering of the modal points, not including, however, the ones in the ocean, as we have here, which would be the 0.5s if we put them in between. Here's an abbreviation of the modes, but only the first 3 letters, not including, again, the 5 ocean notes. Here's going to be our abbreviated letters. Once again, not including the ocean notes. I'm going to include the ocean notes with the letter and a plus sign in that kind of shorthand format. So then we went over here and we looked at our chords, and we looked at the normal convention of the chords, and then how we can name those chords in a convention around the modal point, which is actually more efficient. Why? Because if we look over here, we can see this is basically a list of the basic extensions in a 7-note collection built off all 7 nodes in the collection of notes, but it doesn't really give us any context. It would be better if we named the points not by the notes that they're on, but the relative position, because that gives us context. As we can see here, the buckets that they're going to be in. We need to know the buckets that we're in, and it would be more efficient to do that if we name the chords by the modal points. So we did that in prior presentations, and now we're going to be adding, what if we want to build chords off of the 5 notes that are in the ocean? So I want to build a chord off of the Ionian Ocean. The point here being, if I go to my fretboard, the normal chord construction is a problem. Why? Because it forces me to rethink the collection of notes that I'm in when I think of them from a scale degree standpoint. So even if I'm in the same collection of notes, if I name, like if I move up here to this Dorian and I have to call it a minor, I'm going to imagine it as though it's an Aeolian shape. And I'm going to basically name that the 1, which makes me rename everything. So it would be better if I could name the chords by the absolute position, and that will also give me the intervals related to them, allowing me to functionally stay visualized on the 7-note collection as my main 7 notes as I maneuver around the fretboard. That's going to be our objective. Now, that works great for all of the 7 notes that are in the collection. However, what if I want to build a chord off of a note that's outside the collection? Now, normally from a scale degree standpoint, what you would do is you'd say, well, that's just going to be a C sharp and then a major, or C sharp minor, or something like that. You could still do that, but again, when you do that, it forces you to change the shape around this note to make that like the 1 if you're trying to visualize it. I don't want to do that functionally when I'm playing. What I'd like to do is say, no, I'm still basically in the same collection of notes, realizing that this chord is being built on a note outside the collection. So it would be nice to say, well, I'm still going to call it, the modal point is going to be an Ionian Ocean chord or a 1.5 Nashville number chord, but it happens to have, let's say, an Aeolian shape. So it has an Aeolian shape to it. So that's the way I would like to name it in my mind, so that I can still visualize functionally what I'm doing while also naming the chord specifically and accurately, right? So this is a Nashville number 1.5 Ionian plus or Ionian Ocean chord with an Aeolian shape, meaning a minor shape to it, you know? So that's what I propose here. So I'm going to go back on over here, and that will also, from a technical standpoint, give us the ability to map this out in something like a DAW, so that we can then add chords that are outside of the collection of notes, the 5 notes that are outside the collection if we want to, so that we have the capacity. We're not restricted to the 7-note collection to build chords off of. All right, so last time I went through this, and I'm going to imagine that we have all 7-note chords, so I would name them like a 7-note, because that's the most complex chord instead of a triad, because I want to go, it would be a 7-note Ionian plus or Ionian Ocean Ionian chord, or a 7-note Ionian Ocean or Ionian plus I plus chord, or 1.5 Nashville number chord, Dorian. It would be a 7 Ionian Ocean Phrygian chord, right? It would be a 7 Ionian Ocean Lydian chord. It would be a 7-note Ionian Ocean Mixolydian chord. It would be a 7-note Ionian Ocean Aeolian chord. So that would be the naming convention that gives us all forms of chords that we can construct off of the note that's outside the collection of notes in what I'm calling the ocean notes from our Earth analogy. I believe, once again, that that's the most functionally efficient way to be naming a chord built off of a note outside of the 7-note collection. In essence, an ocean note chord, in this case specifically the Ionian Ocean note chord, or one built off of the 1.5 modal point, giving you not only the structure of the chord, but also the context of it. So let's go back to the fretboard. This is going to be a C major chord that's mapped out, or a 3-note Ionian chord. If we want to build a chord off of an ocean note, in this case, the Ionian Ocean chord, and it's a minor chord, it will look something like this. Instead of just shifting the whole shape up so that I have to look at a whole different collection of 7 notes in order to build that chord, it would be easier to say, hey, look, it's a chord that's built off of the Ionian Ocean note, or the 1.5 note, and it has a structure of a 3-note Aeolian, or in essence, a minor chord structure. That allows me to easily map out the shape of the chord on the fretboard or any other instrument like a piano, for example, but also not change my perspective of the song that I'm playing in, noting that it's still played in the same 7-note collection. I just happen to be building a chord off a note outside that collection of notes. Now, the thing that becomes complicated, however, is if I want to name the modal points from the perspective of a note that's outside of the collection, because I can't just use modal half steps or scale degrees, because if I use scale degrees, I would have to rename everything based off of this point, meaning I'd have to change the collection of notes. If I use modal half steps, they work great for the 7 notes that are inside the collection of notes, but not for one that's outside it, because we're using measurements from the collection of 7 notes. So in essence, we have to use half steps if we have to actually name the modal points. Once we name the modal points, however, they'll be the same for all 12 collections of 7 notes. So that's going to be a benefit from it as well. But let me show you what I mean. If I go back to the blank tab, this is going to be important because if we want to map this out on like a MIDI or something like that in a software, then we need to know the actual modal points so we can be very specific to map it out. And even if we're memorizing it on the fretboard, we can actually memorize, again, the modal points from the perspective of each of the 5 notes that are outside the collection of notes. It's just not as easy for us to map it out like mathematically by taking every other modal half step to build a chord. All right, so let me show you what I mean. We're going to rebuild the modal points over here, but instead of doing it by saying, I'm going to make the first point a scale degree, meaning we're going to name it by the note point, which would be C sharp or D flat, and then we're just going to call it 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on and so forth. The problem there being that we're changing the whole collection of notes, so we don't want to do that because it ruins the context of the song. Normally, we can fix that by saying, hey, look, we should be measuring by modal half steps instead of scale degrees, so I don't have to rename the notes that are in the Nashville number or permanent modal points. So that would work great for any, again, of the 7 notes that are in the collection of notes. It doesn't work for a note that's outside the collection that we're building the chord off of, because by definition, they're not in the 7-note collection. So therefore, when we map out the modal points, we have to use half steps in order to map them out from the perspective of the collection of notes that we're in. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go back up top. I'm going to add some cells here. So I'm going to scroll over, right click and insert and make those a little bit larger. And then I'm going to scroll back down and say, okay, let's just map out the notes that are in the collection of notes from the perspective of like of the 7-note collection. In the 7-note collection, we have one. Let's just put the 7 notes first. I'm going to say from the perspective of the whole half formula. In other words, from the perspective of the major scale, I'm going to skip a note. It would be a whole step to go to 2, whole step to go to 3, and then half step to 4, whole step to go to 5, whole step to go to 6, whole step to 7, and then it goes back to 8, which is a half step, right? The ones that are in the middle are the 5 notes that I'm going to be calling the ocean notes. From a Nashville number perspective, I'm going to call that 1.5. Now you see what the problem here is. When I name modal half step or even scale degrees, then I'm naming them from the 7-note collection, and we're removing the ones that are in the ocean as I do modal half steps, right? So if I put those back in place, what I have to, and I'm measuring from this point, then I have to not use modal half steps or really scale degrees. I have to use note half steps in order to do the measurement from that perspective. Let me show you what I mean. So it would be, I would call this the Ionian, and this would be the Ionian Ocean. Dorian Ocean is 2.5. The Phrygian goes right to the Lydian. There is no Phrygian Ocean. There's no distance between the 3 and the 4 from a permanent Nashville number perspective. Then we have the Lydian and the Lydian Ocean, 4.5. We've got the Mixolydian and then the Mixolydian Ocean. We've got the Aeolian and then the Aeolian Ocean, 6.5. And then we've got the Locrian, and then it repeats again going back to the Ionian. So let's make this blue. Hopefully I got that right. I'm going to make this bordered and blue, and then I'm going to repeat it a couple times. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to the 1 again, and I'm just going to repeat it. We're going around, imagining that we're just going around the clock, going around in a circle, and bring this back up to 7 again. Let's repeat it 2 times. So I'm going to make that green just so we can see the staggering of when it's going to be repeating. And then I'm going to repeat it 1 more time. This equals the 1, and let's repeat it down again. And then delete that last bit down to 7, and let's make that blue. So now we've got it repeated 3 times. Now these are 12 notes, but instead of naming them like as if it was A to G sharp, 1 through 12, we're naming them from the perspective of the 7-note position, which in our case, we're always thinking in the key of C, but the same concept works for all 12 collections of 7 notes. This relative perspective works for all 12 collections of 7 notes. So if I memorize this relative perspective, including the ocean notes, then that works, that relationship is the same for all 12 collections of 7 notes. That's quite useful from a functional standpoint of playing the music, right? So now let's map out next to that and say that I'm gonna put Ionian. Let's say this is gonna be equal to this one. So the Ionian, it's like, okay, how can I map out the fact that now I'm on the Ionian plus, I'm starting on an ocean note. So what I want to do is be able to map out the same distances from this point. So all I'm going to do is stagger this set of notes. I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I'm going to put it right here. Boom. So now I'm on the ocean note 1.5. But if I count it up, if I count up from there in terms of whole steps and half steps from the relative position, it's going to be here whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, right? But I'm going to map it out from the position of 1.5. This will help me to do, the calculation if I'm on a 1.5 and I'm trying to go up to the next note that would be in a major chord construction. What would it be? It would be 4 notes up from a half step standpoint. So I would be on the 1.5 goes to 2, 2.5, 2 goes to 2.5, 2.5 to 3, and then 3 goes to 4. So right, 1, 2, 3, 4 notes up. So that helps. So I can see that in half steps, but it's easier for me if I map it out. If I just stagger it, then I can say, oh, it's going to be the 1 to the 3rd. So I'm mapping out, in essence, the same thing next to it so that I can do an X lookup and say, find the 1 to the 3rd here, and then give me the relative position 1 to the 3rd here, right? And that'll map it out. So that's going to be the general idea. Okay. Now the reason this becomes a little bit more complicated, of course, isn't just because we've got that 1.5, we're doing like half steps in there, but because there's a difference between the 3 and the 4, right? Because there's no half step in between the 3 and the 4, the Phrygian and the Lydian. Okay, so let's say we map out our chord over here, and we're going to say, oh, let's map this thing out. Now, if I'm building a 7-note Ionian that has an Ionian shape to it, it's a 7-note Ionian plus chord, meaning an Ionian ocean chord, but it has an Ionian shape. Let's first imagine that it was just a normal Ionian chord. It has 7 notes in it. I can copy that by saying this is going to be equal to, scrolling up top, here's the Ionian up top. Here was the longest chord, which has all 7 notes. What do? We take the 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, and 6. That has a scale degree that's the same as the modal points because we based the modal points from the perspective of the Ionian perspective or the major scale. So I can just start there and say, okay, if we were going to call that the 1, that would be the structure, right? 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. Now, once again, if I was using a scale degree system, what would I do? I would simply make this the 1. That 1 would be representing now C sharp or D flat. But by doing that, that would be like I'd have to shift up all the colors here up to here, meaning now I'm revisualizing the context of the song as though I shifted from the one collection of notes to another collection of notes, when in actuality what is happening is I'm in the same collection of notes, I'm just building a chord off of a note that I know is outside the collection. That's important information from the context of the song, right? So I'd like to be able to rename these nodes from the perspective of the collection of notes that we're currently using. So that means this needs to start at 1.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up this 1 in this collection of notes here, and I want to return to me the starting point here, which will give me the 1.5. And so let me see what that looks like. So I can say, all right, let's double click on this, and I'm going to put in front of this an X lookup. X lookup that one. I'm going to look up that one, comma, and I want you to find that one in this collection of notes. Find that one over here, Control Shift down, takes me all the way down here, and then comma, compare it to, now I have to have the same amount of notes. I'm gonna go from the top here down all the way down here, ba-boom. And so now they're even. So it's gonna find that one and it's gonna return to me the 1.5. So boom. And so now you can't see it because and I'm gonna delete all these for now. And let's go and add some decimals to all this so I can see the 1.5. All right, I'm gonna double click on this. Now these ranges, I need to be absolute. I don't want those ranges to be changing. So I'm gonna say F4 here, F4, $ before the letter and the number. Keep those ranges the same. When I copy them over, this one I do want to change. I want it to move to the right as I go to the right and down as I go down. So it'll be just a normal reference. If I copy that over, then we get that, okay? And so so then the question is, okay, well, does that make sense? So if I was to build a chord from the Ionian Ocean, a 1.5 chord that has an Ionian or major shape to it, I can count it out and say, all right, well, does that make sense? If I'm going from the first note of the chord is going to be 1.5, and I'm going to then I usually would skip every other modal half step, or the third. The third would be next from a scale degree standpoint. The third, how far away should the third be? The third should be 4 notes up, 4 half steps up. So if I count that over here and I can say, okay, if I was on this 1.5, what are 4 notes up? 1.5 to 2, 2 to 2.5, 2.5 to 3, and then 3 to 4. So we get the 4 notes up here. I can even number it maybe on this side. Maybe I let's pull this on over and see if I can explain this as clearly as possible, because it's kind of gets a little wonky. If I was to say from here to here, we can name the half steps 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to there, right? And then the next one, how many half steps from the scale degree 1, 3, and then the 5? How many half steps is 4th modal half step or 5th scale degree away from the root? It's 7. That's a distance of 7. So then I'd have to go, I can count this out, 5, 6, 7. And so that should be the 5.5. So that the reason that's a little bit wonky to count is, again, because you have this, you're not even counting by 0.5s because you have no 0.5, no ocean note between the Phrygian and the Lydian. There's always between the Phrygian and Lydian a half step, and there's always a half step going home from the Locrian back around the horn to the 1. So these are so it looks like it's doing what we want, right? How many, if I'm going to the 1, 3, 5 to the 7, how far away is the 6th modal half step 7th scale degree from the first point for Ionian for a major scale? 11 notes away. So it'd be 7 and then 8, 9, 10, 11. So here it gets a little bit wonky because here we went around the 11. I don't need the decimals on here. Let's get rid of the decimals. I went around the 11, so that should get me to the 1, right? And then if I add the 9, is equivalent to the 2 in essence, but it's going to be an octave up typically. So how far away is the 9 for a major, if it was a 2, it would be if it was the 2 from an Ionian, it would be 2 half steps up, right? So 2 half steps up would be 2.5, or if I was going to go an octave up, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? Because 14 minus 12 is the local distance of 2, 2.5 or 2.5. Okay, so that's the general idea of it. So it looks like it's mapping out properly. Like I say, you could memorize these points for each of the 5 ocean notes, and they're going to be the same. that's nice because then you can actually memorize them for all 12 collections. So that's actually functionally useful, but most likely you're just going to be doing it by shape. I'm going to learn this and then basically do it by shape. But if I wanted to map it out, we could map it out, but we have to use relative half steps to map it out if I'm actually building from a note that's outside the collection. All right, so what if I copied this down? Now, when I copy it down, let's undo that. What do I want it to do? No, here I have to say this is going to be a D. So now I have a 7 Ionian ocean, or 1.5, but it has a Dorian shape. So I'm going to start over again and say, well, what if this was just a Dorian? This would be equal to, and I'm going to scroll up and look for the Dorian up top and say, okay, the Dorian would be here. If it was a 7-note Dorian, it would look like this. So I'm going to say if it was a Dorian, it would start on the 2. But I don't want to start on the 2. I want to start on the 1.5, right? So how can I figure that out over here? Let me go back on over on this side. I'm going to pull this over here. Let's pull this over here. And then I'm going to pull it, actually, no, that's right. Let's pull it up one. And then I'm going to say that, let's actually put a space in between these two. I'm going to right click and insert. So we're comparing everything to this. I'm going to copy this format and put it here. So this is the thing we're comparing to. And so this is going to be the Ionian. I'm just going to abbreviate it with this lowercase I. Lowercase I, don't mess it up. Lowercase I. And then this is going to be the Dorian. So I'll say Dorian here. And then, so let's pull these down. I'm going to pull these down here. And then this is going to be all Ionian Ocean stuff. So Ionian Ocean up top. Let's add all of them right now. I'm going to insert. And let's say we're going to go Ionian. And then it's going to go to the Phrygian. And then Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian. And then let's add one more, insert, and then it's going to be Locrian with an N. That's my abbreviations. Let's copy this skinny. I'm going to put that skinny over here. And then I'm going to make this whole top header bit black and white. And we'll say drop down black and white. And then I can center these maybe. We'll center these. Okay, so on the Dorian, I'm going to copy this whole bit. I'm going to copy this whole bit and say that's going to be the same, except that we need to start the process here on the 2. So we're going to say, let me think about this 2. This 2 right here needs to be the 1.5. So I have to move this. I have to shift this up to here so it lines up this way. So it actually needs to move up. So let's grab this and let's move it up a bit. And let's try this again. So now I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to move it up to here, paste it, and say, yeah, now this 2 is lined up to this 1.5. So the 2 is lined up to that 1.5. Okay, so that's going to be the general idea. So now I can say what I want to do is convert this 2 to the 1.5 in a similar process. So I'm going to say this is going to be X lookup tab. I want to find that 2, comma. You want to find that 2 in this collection. I'm going to go all the way down to the end of this one. So I have the same length, comma, and then I have to start up here. So I have the same length going down. Find that here in that collection, and then enter. That should give us the 1.5. Okay, so then I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to F4 the end of it, F4, 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 and then I'm going to copy that across. So now we're on this we're building a chord off of the Ionian Ocean chord, but we're starting on 1.5. It's going to be a Dorian shaped chord, however. Now I see a problem here. Notice if I go here, I could see a problem. See how what's the problem? It's picking up this 1 is tying to that 0, and that's wrong. So what I need to do, I'm going to double click on this again, and I'm going to say I can't have a space above it. So I'm going to drag this down to here. I could drag it all the way down to basically the starting point that we're measuring from, that 2 right there. So I think I can grab it down and bring it down to there as long as they're even. And so now that should give me that. Enter, and let's copy that across. And I think that'll fix that problem. Boom. So then there we have it. So now if we check this, if I was to go from this 1.5 to the 1 to the third, it would be only 3 notes away, right? And let's count it out. It would be 1.5. I'm counting on my fingers. And then it would go to 2, and then it would go 2.5, and then 3. So let me check this one more time. If I go to the third, if I was on 1.5, I go 1, 2, 3 to get to here. So that returns to me from the 1.5, the node 3 from there instead of node 4, as it would if it was a major. So that distance looks correct. It looks like to me like it's mapping it out properly. Hopefully that'll continue properly across. Let's copy it down. Let's do the next one and say, okay, well, what if it was an Ionian Ocean, but I'm building a Phrygian chord off it? This is also a minor chord, and you'd only have to really map out whether it be Dorian, Phrygian, or Aeolian if you're building more than a triad. Otherwise, you can always call it an Ionian or a minor chord if you wanted to, right? It's an Ionian Ocean or a 1.5 point minor chord if you wanted to call it the normal convention, or an Aeolian chord if it's just a triad. But if it's a more complicated chord where it's going to be based on the Phrygian, meaning you have the second, which is equivalent to the ninth, which is going to be a minor second or a minor 9, right? Then that's when you'd have to be specific and say, well, it's basically a Phrygian chord that's built off of the 1.5 node. So let's find the Phrygian chord up top and say, all right, the Phrygian is right there. So normally, if it was the longest or most complicated chord, we'd start on the 3. We would take every other modal half step. So it would be the 3. If I copied that across, then it would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then around the horn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 back to 1, right? But now I want to map it out this way. I want to make this 1.5. And then start from there, which we have to use half steps in order to do. That means that this second one should be the third, or the second modal half step or third, which would be a 3 again instead of a 4, because we're building off of the same point, but it's going to have the minor shape to it. So let's say, okay, how can I do that over here? Well, now I'm going to say this 1.5 needs to map not to the 2, but to that 3. So let's copy this whole thing again. I'm going to copy this again and put this like up, I think right there, boom. And so now this 1.5 is mapping to this 3 for the Phrygian. So now I'm just going to do the same thing over here and go, all right, let's double click here and say X lookup, tab, look up that one, comma, find that in this collection of notes, which now I'm just going to start at that 3 now, because that's the important bit. I'm going to go all the way down to the end so it matches here, and then comma, and then I'm going to start at the same point. I want you to return that 1.5 at the start, and I'm going to go all the way down to the end so it's the same distance down, and enter, boom. So now we're at the 1.5, but I'm going to count from there in half steps relative to the 1.5 position that we're in across for the Phrygian intervals. So I'm going to F4 here, F4 the columns to make them absolute. Don't move those out. And then we'll copy this across. And as we do, we can see that what would be the 1 is the same as the one above it because it's a minor mode. The 3 is the same. That makes sense. The 5 is the same. The 7 is the same as the minor. But then the 9 is different because the 9 is different for the Phrygian than both the major scale and minor. So I think that looks correct. Let's try this one. What if we're on the Ionian Ocean, the 1.5, but we're building a Lydian? The Lydian is a major mode, and you'd only need to name it Lydian instead of the Ionian, or instead of a major scale that's built off of the 1.5 node if you're adding the augmented fourth, which is the equivalent to the 11th from a chord construction standpoint. Otherwise, you could just say it's an Ionian, right? You would just say it's an Ionian Ocean, Ionian, or major chord, right? But I could say if it's going to have that augmented 11, then I'm going to say, all right, let me find the Lydian up top. And we're going to say, okay, Lydian, if it was the most complicated 7-note chord, it would look like that. Starting on the 4, for the collection of notes around the key of C, it would go from 4, 6, back to 1, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, and then it would go 1, 2, right? But now what I want to do is say, okay, I want to map this out over here and say, okay, so that means that this 1.5 needs to tie out to not that 3, but the 4. So I need to shift it up just 1. So I'm going to copy this whole thing again, and I'll just shift it up 1. Boom. So now the 1.5 is equal to the 4. All right, let's go over here and fix that. I'm going to double click and say, okay, find that 4, XLOOKUP tab, find that 4 in this collection of notes. I'm going to start right here where the 4 is. That's going to line up to that 1.5, go all the way down to the end so it's even right there, and then comma, and then return to me this one. I'm going to go from here down, boom, to there and enter. So that gives me the 1.5. That looks correct. Double clicking on that, making these absolute. F4 here, F4 here, F4 here, F4 here, $ before the letter and number, enter. Copying that across. And this should tie out more closely to up here, right? So now I've got the same first, 0 modal half step or first, and then I've got the same second modal half step or third. I've got the same fourth modal half step or fifth, and then I've got the same 6th modal half step or 7th, and then I've got the same 8th modal half step or 9, and then this is where the difference is, boom, right there, where you have a difference because the Lydian has a difference when you add the 11th, which is equivalent to the augmented 4th. Okay, so let's do this one. What if I'm on the Ionian Ocean, but now I'm building a Mixolydian chord? That would be a major chord, but it would get out of whack from the Ionian right when you add the 7. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to say this. So this would be a C sharp or D flat 13 chord from a normal naming convention. Let's go up to the Mixolydian up top. Say, where would be the Mixolydian? Mixolydian is Aeolian Mixolydian right there. So this would be the most complicated. Normally it would start on the 5, right? So it would be 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. So, but now I want to convert that 5 to start at the 1.5 node, the ocean point. So that means this 1.5 needs to be not lined up to that 4, but that 5. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing again, copy that, and bring it up to, bam. So now the 1.5 is equivalent to the 5, okay? So then I'm going to go down here and just do my XLOOKUP and just say, okay, this is going to be an XLOOKUP of that, comma, find it in this collection. I'm going to just even it out. The 5 is where we're looking right now. I'll put that down to here, and then comma, and then give me that 1.5 to start with, and then you can count down from there. They have to be an even distance, however. Okay, so there it is, 1.5, and then if I double click on that and F4 the ranges so they don't move, ba-boom, 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 copy that across, and we can say, okay, so now 1.5, the 0 modal half step or first scale degree is the same. The second modal half step or third scale degree is the same. The 4th modal half step or 5th scale degree is the same, but then it gets out of whack on the 6th modal half step modal range or 7th scale degree, because that's where the Mixolydian differs, right? That's the different interval. And then we have the same after that, right? So boom. All right, let's do the same thing. We're on the Ionian Ocean, but we're going to make an Aeolian or minor chord. So this would be the standard Ionian. If it was anything, if it was just a triad and you're making a minor, then you might just call it an Aeolian. It's an Ionian Ocean or a 1.5 minor chord, right? It's a 1.5 node minor chord, all right, so, or Aeolian. So if I was to go to the Aeolian, then normally that would be here. We would start on the 6, which would be if I was in the collection of notes around the key of C, and just go every other one. 6, 7, around the horn to 1, because there's only 7 modal points if you're talking modal half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, because you're going around the horn. 2, 3, 4. All right, but I want to make this start at the 1.5. So I'm going to say, all right, this 1.5 needs to be equivalent to that 6 right there. So I'm going to copy that down and bring that up 2. Boom. And then, so now that 1.5 is the 6. Okay. So then I'll go into here and I'll say X lookup of that 1.5, comma, find that. And this collection of notes, wait a sec, find the 6 in this collection of notes right there. But I'll bring it down to the same even point there, comma, and then return to me the related starting at the 1.5, going down to the same distance down, enter. So that gives me the 1.5. Let's double click on it, and then I'm going to F4 the ranges to make them absolute so they don't move. F4, 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 copy it across, and zoom. So that's the Aeolian. That should be similar to the Dorian. The Dorian is different from the Aeolian when you get to the 6, which is like the 13. So we have the same compared to the Dorian. The Dorian has the same first modal half step or 0 modal half step or first scale degree. It has the same second modal half step or third scale degree. It's got the same fourth modal half step or fifth scale degree. It's got the same sixth modal half step or seventh scale degree. It's got the same eighth modal half step or ninth scale degree. It's got the same 10 modal half step or 11th scale degree, but then it has a different 12 modal half step or 13th scale degree, because that's equivalent to the 6th, and the Dorian has a major 6th. All right, if we finally do this on the Locrian, we're going to say the Locrian normally, if I go up top, would be here. We'd start on the 7 if we're looking at the collection of notes around the key of C, and then it would go 7 around the horn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. But I want that 7 now to be, this 7 needs to be lined up to that 1.5 so that we can count it out. I need to move this up 2 more, I think. Move this up 2 so I have some room. So we'll copy this again and move it up 2 there, but bam. And then I can say, all right, now that 1.5 is equivalent to the 7. So now let's go here and go double click and say, I want to see, this is going to be X lookup of that point, comma, find it, find that 7 here, and I'm going to bring it all the way down so it's even, comma, return to me this from here, the 1.5 down, so it's even, but bam, enter. Okay, so there's the 1.5. We're going to double click on that, F4, 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 bam, copy that across. Now the Locrian is more similar actually to the Phrygian. It's the most similar to the Phrygian, but let's compare it to the Aeolian. So it's got the same 0 modal half step or first scale degree. It's got the same second modal half step or third, but then it has the flat 5, right? So the Locrian has the flat 5 and that's where it's weird. And then it has 6th modal half step, 7th scale degree is the same. 8th modal half step, 9th scale degree, where it has, once again, a flat, which is similar to the Phrygian, right, up here. And then it's got the 10 modal half step, 11th scale degree is the same, and the 12 modal half step or 13th scale degree is the same. Okay. So let's make these a little bit larger. If I convert these to the modal points, it's not working because these modal points are coming from here up top, where I was not including the ocean notes. So instead of going from here, I'm just going to move this over and say, let me convert all of these that are in the point of view of modal points to this abbreviated format, which includes not only the 7-note collection, but also an abbreviation for the ocean notes. So I'm just going to say, all right, I can just fix that. That's easy to do. So maybe I'll just double click here and see if I can do it that way. So I can just move it. Wait a second. Double click, and then I'll go boom, and say this needs to be over here. So it needs to be over here, and this needs to be over here, and they need to be longer down to there. So X lookup here, X lookup the number and give me the letter. X lookup the number and give me the letter. Boom. If I double click on that, the ranges are absolutized, so I should be able to copy this down and across. So now we're starting in the Ionian Ocean on each of them. Let's format paint this down. Format paint this down here. And then copy this down. So I'm starting on the Ionian Ocean all the way down, and then I'm just converting the nodal points on over, and you can do the same kind of comparison for the similar nodes, Ionian, the majors, the minors, and so on. You can compare them together. Now this is giving me the note half steps. So the note half steps are going to be, if it's a major, it should be 0, and then the second modal half step or 3rd scale degree is 4 notes away. The 4th modal half step or 5th scale degree is going to be 7 notes away, and so on and so forth. Now this is a pretty ugly formula to do that. I'm not sure I want to get into the detail on that again, because we looked at it before, but it's doing the calculation. Why is it ugly? Because we don't want to go over, I'm trying to keep it within the local distance, but it's basically subtracting these two out, right? It's finding these two numbers over here in our number system over here, and then looking at the number and doing a subtraction between them. And if it comes out with a negative number, then it's accommodating for any kind of negative number, and so on. So if I copy that across this way, does it work if I copy that across? So it should then go to, I think it does. So I'm going to copy these across this way. And so, okay, and then copy this one across. So now we've got, it should be 0, and then the second modal half step or 3rd scale degree is 4 notes away. The 5 modal half is 7 notes away, and then the 6th modal half step or 7th scale degree for a major is 11 note half steps away, and then the 8th modal half step or 9th scale degree has a local distance of 2 notes away, or 2 plus 12, which would be 4 half steps away. And then the 10th modal half step or 11th scale degree has a local distance of 5 away, or 5 plus 12, and so on. So I think that looks right. What if I copy it down here? Does it work to copy it down this way? So now I'm looking at the Aeolian should have 3, 7, 10, and then 2, 5, 8. I think that works. So I'm going to copy that down. So these are the distance in half steps, basically, right? So that's the same kind of idea. That will be the same half step distances that we looked at before. This is the interval distance. So now we've got, from an interval perspective, if we measure everything from the first point, it's going to be the same for, if it's an Ionian, the zero modal half step or first should be a perfect first. 0 notes away. Oh no, undo. We know that the third should be 4 note away, which is a minor third. Then we should go to the fourth modal half step or fifth scale degree, which should be 7 notes away, which we call a perfect fifth. Now, what if I double click on that? It's doing an X lookup that we just copied down. Looks like it's doing it properly. And we're just doing an X lookup, finding the distance here and returning to us the interval. So that looks correct, I think. And I should be able to just copy this across like this. So if we go 7, it should be a major 7, 11 note away major 7, and then a local distance of a 2 note away major second, 5 note away perfect fourth, 9 note away major 6. If I copy the Dorian across, then we have a perfect first, a 3 note away minor third, a 7 note away perfect fifth, 10 note away minor 7, a 2 note away major second, or 11 note away, or we'll keep, that's the local distance, 5 note away perfect fourth, 9 note away major 6, and then we go to the Phrygian where we have a 0 note away perfect first, 3 note away minor third, 7 note away perfect fifth, 10 note away minor 7, 1 note away minor second, 5 note away perfect fourth, 8 note away minor sixth, and then we go to what am I on, the Lydian, where we have a 0 note away perfect first, 4 note away major third, 7 note away perfect fifth, 11 note away major 7, 2 note away minor second, 6 note away diminished fifth, which should be augmented fourth, but again, that's the wonky one. I'll make that colored like red maybe to show you that that's because I don't want to get all crazy with the 2 name thing. Let's see if I copy this down this way. Does it work copying it down? That's the Aeolian. Aeolian has a 0 note away perfect first, 3 note away minor third, 7 note away perfect fifth, 10 note away minor 7, 2 note away minor second, 5 note away perfect fourth, 8 note away minor 6. I think that's correct. If I copy this down again, then we've got a Locrian, 0 note away perfect first, 3 note away minor 7, 6 note away diminished fifth is correct that time, 10 note away minor 7, 1 note away minor second. Okay, I think that's right. What about the modal distance? So the modal distance is just going to say that it should be the modal distance from the point if that was the one. So what is this doing? It's taking that modal distance and then it's tying it to that nodal point. I think that should work, but this needs to be absolute if I'm going to copy it across. That cell, which is AF64, needs to be absolute. So AF64, I'm going to F4 this one and then copy that across, and I think it should work. All right, so something looks off again. So it's taking that. I think I F4'd the wrong one. Let's undo, double click. This needs to be F4'd, which is AF64. So AF, this AF64, that needs to be F4'd, not this. Get rid of the dollar signs there. That's normal. Okay, so let me do this one more time. So we have AF needs to be, there's 3 things here. That and that. So this needs to move and that needs to move. So that's fine. Now, that's fine. Let's keep it like that. So if I copy that across, there we have it. So now, let's make this a little larger, see if that makes sense. So now we've got a 0 note away from the Ionian node, which would be 0 modal half steps, a 4 note away from the Ionian node, which would be from the Ionian Ocean node, which would be 2 modal half steps, 7 note away from the Ionian Ocean node, which would be 4 modal half steps, 11 note away from the Ionian Ocean node, which would be 6 modal half steps. Let's make this a little larger. And then 2 node away from the Ionian Ocean node, 8 modal half steps, and would be 5 node away from the Ionian Ocean node. Okay, and that would be 10 modal half steps, and then 12 modal half steps. Now this modal half step is taking the octave into consideration, where these are not, but I think that's correct. Let's double click here. So I'm gonna F4 the beginning one, and I'm gonna F4 these and then un-F4 them, meaning unabsolute reference them when I copy the entire thing down to the other 4 of 5 ocean nodes that we'll build off of. So I'm just gonna say just this middle bit F4 that, instead of making a mixed reference so I can copy it down. I'm gonna double click here and just F4 that, and then copy that across. And then I'm gonna double click here and F4 that, and then copy it across. And then I'm going to double click here and F4 that and copy it across. Okay, now when I copy them down, it's going to get messed up because it's going to move this one down. So if I copy these down like this, double click, it moved this one down. So that's not right. I'm going to move that back up. And then everything else is correct. I'm going to double click on this one and move that one down. I'm going to move that back up. And then I can copy these 2 across. Boom. And I think that's right. So that means that this one has, so it should be, so this is the 2 modal half steps, Ionian 2 modal half step, 4 modal half step, 6 modal half step, 8 modal half step from the Ionian node. All right, now I think these are right. Now notice that both of these, when I look at these distances from the standpoint of something that's built off of an ocean note, I kind of have to convert these to the distance in half steps if I want to measure them out, right? Because I'm building off of the 1.5 node. So if I say that it's going to be a 4 node away from the Ionian plus or the Ionian Ocean or the 1.5 node second modal half step, right? I can't really count out 2 modal half steps from the point in the ocean, but I can say that I know that a 2 modal half step is going to be a distance of 2, or a 4 modal half step is going to be a distance of 7, basically, if it's going to be an Ionian type of chord. So the basic idea is that I have to look at these distances and I have to see them in terms of basically the half steps. So keep that in mind. And that, by the way, is why I like to put the modal half steps up front. It's a 7 node away, Ionian Ocean, 4th modal half step, right? But anyway, okay. Let's go to the next one and the notes. So this is just converting to the note name. So if I was to see it, is this doing it properly? We're gonna go, okay, it's looking that up. It's looking that up here, and then it's giving me the note. So it's giving me, I'm looking up the number, and it's giving me the actual note. So that makes sense, and it's starting with this. So I'm looking at the 5. Which is going to be, okay, that 5 represents C sharp or D flat. Let's copy that 5 down. So it's copied down to here. So it'll be copied across and go back on over and say, all right, well, that copy down properly. So it goes C sharp to F. Is that right? Oh, wait a sec. That F is looking at, that 5, and then it's saying, what exactly is it saying here? It's going to an F. I think that's right, but let me think about it for a second. It's going, if that plus AD 67 plus BB 67 plus AD 67, BB plus BB 67 plus AD 67. I'm a little baffled on that form. It looks like it's working, my head is going on the formula. Okay, I see it now. So yeah, it's looking at this one. So here's the note half steps from the starting point of 5, and then it's looking that up over here to give me the number of the note number, and then it's giving us the related name. So that's good. So that'll give us the actual name and the collection of notes. I think that's correct. Let's copy that across this way. I think it should just work. So if we go across, all right, I think that's right. I should just be able to copy these across, and I think that's going to populate properly. So it'll give us the actual notes changing as we change the key up top up here. So as I change this key, we're looking at the collection of notes around the key of C. If I want to look at the collection of notes around the G, make that an 11, and so on. So that should be the key, and that should change all of these for all collections of notes. And I'm going to copy that down, and it should work this way. Boom. All right, let's make this a little larger because now we've got the notes that are outside. All right. I think that's the general gist of it. So now I'm going to format paint this down. Boom. It's beautiful. So now I'm going to copy this down to the other 4 of the 5 notes outside the collection of notes next time. Before I do that, let's copy this down. I'm going to try to think about how can I fix this thing, which often will be to unabsolute some cell references, so that when I copy it down, I can do as few changes as possible. One of the changes I know I'm going to have to do is to make a whole nother one of these things that are built off for each of the notes that are outside the collection of notes. I want to make that the only real hurdle for me to do this is